but I kind of want to start with that framework you get that comes from physiotherapy, where you said range of motion. What was the second one?
Neuromuscular control.
Neuromuscular control. And then the third one was kinetic chain?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just break down, what do those three mean? Range of motion just means that you should be able to cover a certain amount of movement in space. Neuromuscular control meaning that you have control over the full range of motion, and that basically you're wired in a way where when you choose to move a certain way, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, that there is stability and control over that movement. And then what is kinetic chain when it comes to shoulder specifically?
Yes, so think about the kinetic chain as being the entire human movement system. The phrase I quite like about this is the shoulder is not an island. Like, it has to be connected to the other parts of the system. So let's take as a working example for people, if they look at the kinetic chain and force transfer through the shoulder. So let's take a throwing or a striking sport. Roughly, depending on which research paper you look at, 50% of the force is going to be generated from the lower body, 30% from the midsection or your core, and then 20% from the shoulder. Now, if the kinetic chain isn't integrated and working efficiently, we might lose some of that force generation and force transfer potential. But we go into a sports-based context, and we still need to serve a tennis ball at 100 miles an hour, or throw a baseball, or throw a clean or a cluster, a thruster, or whatever it might be. Now, if we're lacking the ability to generate and transfer forces, the shoulder then has to pick up the slack that's not being generated by the rest of the chain. So then it's going to pretty quickly reach its physiological capacity, in a sense of go, I'll pick it up. We need to execute. I got to punch this guy in the face at like full tilt, but I'm carrying a lot of the stuff. I've got this team on my back, and I'm just trying to kind of get us through this thing. So if we can find ways where we can train the shoulder in a way which creates that connection, again, that those neurological pathways where we get better at transferring, stabilizing, and generating forces, total body, then the shoulder has an easier ride, and we're not going to find that we're going to cause it so much of a potential overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is where the complexity comes into play, because there's very little we do in life where the shoulder is purely isolated. Even when we're sitting typing at our computer or whatever, moving around, the movement comes from the entire body. And to create a perfect, ideally, transfer of energy from your hips or from the ground force all the way down into the shoulder and then into your fingertips is massive. This is something that I think it was over 15 years ago. I went to the Titleist Performance Institute, where they were analyzing people's golf swing, and they were analyzing the speed of acceleration and deceleration of the lower body, upper body, arms, and then club, to make sure that the ball was hit correctly. And I think they were calling it like kinematic sequencing at the time. And it's a complex problem to solve, but it's a fundamental one. I'm curious, are you able, or do you compartmentalize your thinking when approaching solving shoulder problems? Or do you actually start with the kinematic sequence, the kinetic chain first, and then work your way into neuromuscular control and then range of motion? What's your approach if you took that three-prong lens right there?
Yeah, I love that.
To tackle this.
To one point you made before, every day is shoulder day. Right, we sometimes in our split bro routine, we would have like got his chest or his back, or it's not. It's even bis and tris his shoulder, because we've got musculature which attaches to the scapula. Yeah. So we have to remember that we are loading it all the time, and that is a consideration about how much we think we can load a shoulder. In terms of the problem solving around this, I always start with what are we asking the shoulder to do, because that's super important. My example of that would have been, as I said before, with going back to play rugby. I've got really low level and low intensity neuromuscular control, and I can kind of do 4-point kneeling, and I might be able to lift my hand off the ground, and okay, cool, it physio signs you off. Nowhere near ready for the demands of the sport or the environment that I'm going to go back into. So that comes first. What are we trying to do? Let's reverse engineer the process from there. And this is a fairly simple principle, I think, around solving human movement problems, but rather than asking what is injured, we go, why is it injured? So if we start big picture and we go, let's look at the global movement pattern, let's look at everything, let's look at hip internal, external rotation, because that might be causing a problem in a baseball athlete's ability to throw a fastball. And then we start to segment and problem solve in from there of going, actually, you could jump in and go, external rotation is weak. Okay, but we've missed the fact that something else is causing a bigger problem. And until we fix that, we've got very minimal chance of having success with this very isolated strategy. So one of the movements that I'll test is a single leg squat. It gives me an idea around function. It shows me whether they've got pelvic, knee, and ankle stability. Because if I'm lacking there and we're in a athletic sport or context, that shoulder's not got a stable base to sit on. So I might need to do some hip work in order to create stability so that the shoulder has got a better structure to integrate with and can therefore be more efficient. So while people, I think, want to simplify things and go, oh, it's your serratus anterior, well, it might be, but that serratus is, and if you go down like fascial, like anatomy trained lines, we are to talk about spiral lines. So now we start to think about how we integrate more of movement patterns into the muscle strength or isolated function that we need in order to make that a meaningful part of human movement and part of the brain's ability to execute movement patterns. Otherwise, we end up with a great serratus anterior, which is good in isolation, and like people don't get better. They don't see improvements because it hasn't plugged it all back together and gone, boom, now we've got movement. Now we can bring it all together as one system.
Yeah. I can imagine. I was just, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about maybe my dad. Okay, he has a shoulder thing. He goes in to see you, and he comes in and he says, "Hey, Tim, I got this shoulder problem, impingement. Help me out." And you're like, "Okay, let's see your lunge or your single leg squat." He's like, "Why are you, why are you testing my squatting? That is ridiculous." But I think this right here is at the crux of the conversation. And I think it's so important because it's being able to think about movement as a gateway for solving specific problems. And right now, one of the things that I think you're tackling and you're doing such a beautiful job at is solving this issue that traditionally has not been addressed from a holistic perspective and needs this integration to happen. So I just love hearing this from you.